Okay, let's untack this. Forget the roaring 20s glamour for a moment. Our deep dive today begins not with champagne flutes and jazz, but in the thick, silent, and potentially suffocating fog of London. And on a very surprising date, New Year's Eve, 1923.
Yeah.
This wasn't a party. This was an emergency economic meeting that would, well, fundamentally decide the fate of a continent.
And the atmosphere was one of just profound desperation. Germany was completely shattered. We aren't talking about a recession. This is a societal collapse, and it's triggered by hyperinflation.
Right.
I mean, the money supply was so vast that people were literally using banknotes to light stoves or, carrying cash in wheelbarrows because the paper itself was worth less than the effort to move it. Faith in the state, faith in the currency, Germany standing in the world, it was all utterly broken.
And this desperate situation brings together our main characters for this, well, this bizarre late-night drama. On one side, you have Helmar Schacht, the German currency commissioner. He's arriving to basically beg for capital, hoping to rebuild his country's reserves and, restore some credibility to the mark. And on the other, this imposing, almost mythical figure who held the keys to the vaults of global finance, Montague Norman, governor of the Bank of England.
It's the perfect historical moment to explore the sharp questions you've brought to us. Our mission today is to uncover who truly governs a nation. Is it the elected officials, or is it the people who control the money flow? We want to know what single quality is more valuable than gold or currency itself. And finally, how are these monumental, world-changing peace plans actually decided in secret rooms, forcing political leaders to just fall in line?
We are going deep into this concept that the most decisive wars are fought not with guns and cannons, but with this fragile, intangible force we call trust. So let's start with that opening scene, because it immediately reveals the true dynamics of power here. Schacht, representing a deeply broken nation, steps off the train at 10 p.m. on New Year's Eve in London. He's tired, he's desperate, and he hasn't even had time to check into his hotel. But who is waiting personally on the platform?
Montague Norman, the governor of the Bank of England. He treated Schacht like a long-lost, close relative.
Incredible.
And this is where we get the first glimpse of how power operates outside of public view. Why would a figure of Norman's stature, a man known for his eccentric isolation and, frankly, his disdain for petty politics, why would he expend that kind of personal effort for someone coming from the weakest negotiating position imaginable?
It seems like a very intentional psychological move, doesn't it? To disarm the weak by showing this massive personal respect.
Exactly. It's not about pity, it's about control. Norman was known for being intensely private, almost aggressively antisocial, yet he shows up. This immediate courtesy sets the expectation. Schacht is now operating within Norman's highly personal sphere of influence. He's bypassing the normal diplomatic channels. It's a way of saying, the political theater is over, the real negotiations happen here with me.
And the headquarters itself, the Bank of England, it reinforced this image, a silent authority. It was a fortress. You had these high walls, few windows, massive bronze doors, a place just designed for secrecy. But what's truly fascinating is the description of the governor's personal office. It was empty.
Completely empty. No exposed papers, no files, no clutter, just 2 telephones on an immense desk.
What?
And this is the first heavy lesson of the day. True power, the kind that dictates frameworks and sets global conditions, is often quiet. It's clean. It leaves very few traces. It's not the person shouting on the political stage, nor the one surrounded by towering stacks of documents that just symbolize being busy. If you want to know who is truly in charge, observe who is setting the underlying conditions and whose desk is clean, because they operate at the level of synthesis and strategy, not execution.
So, Schacht, energized maybe by this personal welcome but still representing a bankrupt nation, he goes straight to the core problem. He proposes a massive and, a really risky financial maneuver. He requested an initial $25 million loan, then another $25 million, essentially as bait, to secure the confidence required for a much larger total $200 million loan.
It was pure financial daring, given the state of Germany. They were gambling their entire future on a single nod from Britain. And what's fascinating is that Norman accepted after only one night's thought. But the swiftness of that acceptance wasn't an act of charity. And that's the crucial hidden motive we have to examine.
Okay, walk us through that strategic motive here. It seems too simple to just be helping Germany out of a jam.
It was anything but simple. Norman saw the hyperinflation crisis as an opportunity, and not just to stabilize Germany, but to strategically secure the British pound's position.
Uh,
By anchoring a major industrial power like Germany directly into the financial stability model dictated by London, Norman was essentially working to make the British pound the central gold standard for the continent. He was positioning Britain not as some benevolent ally, but as the indispensable financial core of post-war Europe.
that sounds less like foreign aid and more like a carefully executed financial annexation. Did anyone, particularly shocked, recognize how deeply they were being brought into the British financial orbit, potentially at the expense of their own long-term autonomy?
Shocked had very little choice. When you are drowning, you don't really debate the political implications of the lifeboat. But the sources reveal a fundamental truth in this world. Help is rarely ever a one-sided endeavor. It is invariably intertwined with the strategic pursuit of securing one's own system, and the price of that aid is often a loss of independence.
With the British door open, the real muscle arrived in the form of the Americans. We bring in figures like Charles Dawes and Owen Young, and they brought the one resource Europe was desperately craving.
And that Britain didn't have enough of, abundant American capital.
Right.
The political environment was still just toxic. It was dominated by the question of war reparations. The sore spot was the total gargantuan debt Germany owed. If the negotiators touched that absolute number, the French would revolt, the British would protest, and the entire political agreement would just collapse.
So how did the American experts, backed by powerful finance, solve this impossible political problem?
They avoided the number entirely. They created what became known as the Dawes Plan, and it was a political solution disguised as technical finance. It didn't fix the total debt, but it set up a mechanism for gradual repayment based on Germany's ability to pay. It established international supervision and, most critically, it injected that initial international $200 million capital infusion. This capital was the necessary antidote to the crisis of credibility.
It was a way to let everyone save face while addressing the immediate crisis of trust. And we see that power of narrative, the power of the story, demonstrated in the source's second case study, the French franc crisis of 1924.
Yes, France itself, despite being on the winning side of the war, experienced this frightening currency decline when the franc fell sharply. And the official and popular blame was immediately put on foreign speculators, on some shadowy external enemy undermining French confidence.
Blaming an external enemy is always psychologically easier than acknowledging internal problems, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's less painful to admit an external enemy is undermining you than it is to admit you have chronic internal faults like uncontrolled budget deficits and accounting holes. But here's the magic trick that stabilized it. The sources show that the mere announcement of a $100 million stabilization loan from JP Morgan was enough. It immediately halted the slide and stabilized the franc. The money hadn't even arrived yet.
And here's where it gets really interesting. This shows that markets often do not react to the truth. They react to the story, or the signal that makes them less afraid. The financial fundamentals hadn't changed, but that vote of confidence from a giant financial institution instantly shifted the collective psychology.
That's exactly it.
The speculators who were supposedly attacking the francs suddenly backed off, not because the internal budget problems were fixed, but because they wouldn't dare bet against JP Morgan.
That's it. It's the second key lesson. Credibility, delivered by a powerful authority, acts as an instant psychological stabilizer in a crisis.
And that dynamic takes us to the London Conference, where the Dawes Plan was officially finalized. You had prime ministers and foreign secretaries filling the rooms, making these impassioned speeches, but they were almost theatrical performers.
They were necessary for the public endorsement, of course, but the power lay elsewhere. The people who truly held the rhythm of the negotiations and set the binding terms were Montague Norman and Thomas Lamont of JP Morgan. They were the ones who were not fighting over rhetoric or national pride. They were focused solely on the mechanics and conditions necessary to secure the loan, and therefore secure the agreement.
And those conditions were absolutely brutal, directly impacting political sovereignty. Detail the demands the financiers placed on the politicians.
Yeah. They demanded two things that severely restricted the political power of the victors. First, France had to withdraw its troops from the critical Ruhr region, effectively ending their ability to enforce reparations unilaterally. Second, and it's crucial, the mechanism for declaring that Germany is slow to pay could no longer be controlled by France alone. It was handed over to a neutral international body controlled largely by financiers.
So the financiers dictated key points of foreign policy and national defense. The political figures must have fought this bitterly.
They did. The sources describe how politicians fought, they cried, they threatened to walk out. They expressed this profound national anger at the loss of control. But ultimately, the financiers' logic prevailed. They held the ultimate veto. No acceptance of these non-negotiable conditions, no international capital injection. And no one dared let the plan die and allow the hyperinflation crisis to return. They had to yield.
They had to yield to the financial veto power.
Yeah.
The major implication for you is clear. Money is not just a medium of exchange. In times of crisis, it becomes, quite literally, a veto power that can override elected government policy and dismantle military occupations. Whoever provides the capital controls the conditions.
And if we connect this back to your fundamental question, we have to recognize the ultimate currency at play. It is not the dollar, the pound, or gold. It is credibility. Money is the shell. Credibility, trust is the core. When credibility collapses, the shell turns into worthless paper, like we saw in Weimar Germany.
And this explains the immense power of the seal, that stamp of approval from a credible institution like the Bank of England or J.P. Morgan. It functions as a powerful psychological rule. Social proof.
Exactly. Investors are terrified of uncertainty. No investor wants to be the first person to step onto the thin ice of a shaky economy. But if a giant, a Montague Norman or a Thomas Lamont steps on first announcing their confidence, the crowd follows immediately. The perceived risk is instantly reduced.
So the reason finance could dictate politics was a simple sociological principle. Whoever controls the scarce resource dictates the rules of the game. Post-war, capital was the desperately scarce resource. So the capitalists, the financiers, set the rules, and the political leaders, despite their elected mandates, had to play by them.
And this all loops back to the psychological mechanism of blame we discussed with the French franc crisis. Blaming those foreign speculators became a much more convenient political narrative than looking honestly at internal mistakes like chronic government overspending and a failure to implement proper taxation systems.
It's always easier to unite against a phantom external enemy than it is to admit collective internal faults. This history teaches us how effective narrative management is at diverting accountability.
Indeed. Acknowledging your own fault is the harder path. And this historical moment, full of high-stakes tension and secret deals, offers us 4 heavy lessons that apply just as much to your personal and professional life as they did to international finance.
Let's look at what we can extract from this pressure cooker of history.
Lesson 1. Trust precedes capital. Schacht didn't just need money, he needed the nod and the credibility of a center of power like Norman. In life, before you seek opportunity, partnership, or capital, you must first build competence, consistency, clear ethics, and a reliable history of action. If you don't have credibility, no amount of money will save you when the market turns.
Lesson 2. True power is quiet. Go back to that empty office with 2 phones and no clutter. Don't be mesmerized by those who speak the loudest, promise the most, or create the most drama. Instead, maintain humble vigilance and observe meticulously who is setting the binding conditions, who is controlling the flow of scarce resources, and establishing the final framework. Those are the people in charge.
Lesson 3. Identify, organize, delay. The Dawes plan was brilliant, but it was designed specifically to avoid the politically toxic root problem, the total debt. It bought time. You have to recognize the plans in your own life, the busy work, the temporary fixes, the minor adjustments that allow you to breathe but don't cure the root flaw. Ask yourself relentlessly, where is the core cause of this pain, and am I confusing activity or temporary relief with an actual structural remedy?
That's a critical distinction, not confusing a small tactical win with addressing a major strategic flaw.
And finally, lesson 4, the necessity of humble vigilance. The story of these financiers shows that while competence is necessary for the game, humility is much rarer. Ego can blind you and make you prey to power games. Montague Norman was masterful because he saw reality clearly, even if he was eccentric. Mastery, whether in finance or life, requires looking clearly, choosing what to do, not trying to rigidly control every single outcome.
This deep dive shows us that history-making moments sometimes begin not with the sound of cannons firing in a massive war, but with a simple secret meeting between 2 men in a fog-bound city. Empires don't necessarily fall due to bombs, but due to broken trust and a loss of confidence. The ultimate currency is that credibility you build, both in the eyes of others and through the consistency of your own actions.
And here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over, based on the principle of the Dawes plan. The system appeared stable for a few years because the underlying financial problem was carefully postponed. Stability is often just the lag time of a bigger, unaddressed mistake that hasn't materialized yet. So, how can you distinguish in your own financial, personal, or professional systems between genuine structural health and mere temporary stability built on delaying a difficult but necessary confrontation?
Go forth and start examining those underlying conditions. Thank you for joining us on the deep dive, and keep thinking about trust as the single most powerful currency in the world.